The sun was melting over the desert highway, bleeding orange light across the hood of a beat-up Peterbilt. The chrome used to shine like a mirror, but now it was dull and dusty, just like the woman behind the wheel. Her name was Mary Jo Carter, a 42-year-old single mom who'd been hauling freight since she was old enough to lie about her age and take her daddy's truck for a spin. She used to joke that diesel was her perfume and asphalt was her church floor. But lately, she didn't joke much. Her teenage son, Dylan, barely spoke to her anymore. Always mad that she was gone, always thinking she cared more about the road than about him. She didn't blame him. The long nights, the missed birthdays, the endless miles, they wore her thin. But trucking was all she had. After her ex walked out, after the bills piled up, after she lost her home, the open road became her last kind of freedom. That night she was driving through New Mexico, halfway between nowhere and less than that. Her trailer was loaded with furniture heading for Flagstaff, and the CB chatter had died hours ago. Just her, the hum of the tires, and the low growl of the engine. The air was dry as bone. Her water jug had been empty since Tucumcari, and she told herself she'd stop at the next station. That was an hour ago. The map showed nothing for miles. She licked her cracked lips and sighed. "Figures," she muttered. "The one day I forget to restock." Her throat burned. Every breath hurt a little. She leaned back, letting the cruise control hold steady at 63 miles per hour, when she saw something strange ahead. A figure. Standing on the shoulder, right where the fading sunlight met the shadows. Mary Jo frowned. You didn't see people walking out here, not unless they were broken down or running from something. She eased off the gas, blinking through the windshield grime. The figure was a man. He wore light-colored clothes, like old linen or something you'd see in an old Bible painting. Barefoot. Head slightly bowed. She slowed to a stop, the truck hissing as air brakes exhaled. The man didn't move. He just stood there, like he'd been waiting. Mary Jo rolled down her window, the heat slapping her face like an open oven. "Hey!" she shouted. "You okay out there?" The man looked up. And she froze. His eyes, there was something impossible about them. They weren't just bright, they shone. Like the reflection of sunlight on still water. Calm, endless, patient. "I'm thirsty," he said softly. His voice was gentle, but it carried through the air like it came from somewhere deeper than sound. Mary Jo swallowed. "Ain't we all?" she said, trying to sound casual. "You, need a ride somewhere?" He smiled faintly. "Only for a moment. You wouldn't happen to have some water, would you?" Her stomach twisted. The one thing she didn't have. "I'm out," she said. "Haven't seen a rest stop in hours." He nodded slowly, like he already knew. Then he said, "That's all right. You've been thirsty for a lot longer than that." Her hand froze on the steering wheel. "What's that supposed to mean?" He stepped closer to the window, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw light shimmer around him, soft and warm like candlelight. "You've been driving a long road, Mary Jo. Looking for something you can't seem to find." Her mouth went dry for a whole new reason. "How do you know my name?" He tilted his head slightly. "Because I've known you since before you ever took the wheel." Something in her chest stuttered. The air around her felt heavy, electric. "All right," she said, forcing a nervous laugh. "You some kind of preacher? I don't got time for Bible talk tonight." He smiled again. "You've had time for everything else." The words hit like a slap. Her temper flared. "Listen, mister, I've been through hell and back. You don't know what I've had time for." But his eyes didn't change. He didn't argue. He just looked at her with a kind of sadness that made her chest ache. "I know," he said quietly. "And I was there for all of it." Mary Jo felt something sting behind her eyes. She didn't understand why. Maybe it was the heat, or the loneliness, or the way this stranger seemed to speak right through her armor. "Who are you?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, and then, so faint she almost missed it, he smiled and said, "Someone you used to believe in." Her heart skipped. And before she could ask anything else, before she could even blink, he turned and started walking down the shoulder, barefoot on the hot pavement, the last rays of sun catching on his white clothes. "Wait!" she called, opening her door. But he didn't stop. He kept walking, calm, steady, until the light swallowed him. She ran after him, 10, 20 steps, but when she turned the bend in the road, there was nothing. Just the empty desert stretching forever. Mary Jo stood there breathing hard, her hands trembling. "Jesus," she whispered under her breath. And that's when she felt it. A breeze. Soft, cool, impossible. And faintly, impossibly, she heard words carried in it. "I am." Her knees almost gave out. She stumbled back to her truck, her pulse racing, tears she didn't even understand burning her eyes. She slammed the door, started the engine, and drove. Faster than she should have. But no matter how far she went, that voice echoed in her head, soft, calm, and terrifying in its certainty. "I am." And deep down, she already knew. This wasn't just some desert mirage. She'd seen him. The same Jesus she stopped believing in years ago. But why her? Why now? And what did he mean by, "You've been thirsty for a lot longer than that"? She didn't know yet. But the road ahead was about to tell her. Mary Jo drove until the stars came out, 1,000 of them scattered over the desert sky like salt on black velvet. Her hands trembled on the wheel. The radio was off. She couldn't stand the noise. Couldn't stand anything that might drown out the words that kept whispering through her thoughts. "You've been thirsty for a lot longer than that." "I am." Every time she replayed them, her chest tightened like someone was squeezing her heart from the inside. She pulled into a rest stop around midnight, one of those lonely ones with a single flickering streetlight, a vending machine that hadn't worked since the Bush years, and a broken picnic table. She parked her truck, shut off the engine, and just sat there for a while, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. It had been years since she prayed. Decades, maybe. Not since she was a girl sitting in the back pew beside her mom, wearing that itchy blue dress and pretending to pay attention. Her mom had always told her, "When you're lost, just talk to him. He'll hear you." But the last time she tried, he didn't. Not when her husband left. Not when she had to pawn her wedding ring to buy groceries. Not when she got that call that Dylan was caught stealing because the lights had been cut off at home. That was when she'd stopped believing. And yet, tonight, on this empty highway, he'd shown up. She climbed down from the cab, boots crunching on gravel, and sat on the bumper, staring out at the endless dark. The air smelled like dust and diesel. "I don't know what you want from me," she muttered. "If that was even you." The night didn't answer. The cicadas droned in the bushes. She sighed, rubbing her arms. "I'm just trying to survive. You think I want to be out here, sleeping in parking lots, driving until my back feels like it's on fire? You think I like missing my kid growing up?" Her voice cracked. She dropped her face into her hands. "I'm doing my best," she whispered. For a long time, there was nothing. Just the hum of the distant highway. Then, faintly, she heard it again, like the wind shifted through the desert scrub. "You've been doing it alone." Mary Jo froze. Her head snapped up, scanning the dark. "Who's there?" But there was nobody. Just the desert, the stars, the whisper of sand sliding against sand. Her heart hammered. "This isn't funny," she said. "You think I'm gone because you stopped talking." Her throat closed. "You're not real," she said weakly. "You're not here. And yet, you heard me." Her breath caught in her chest. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why now?" The voice was quiet, almost tender. "Because you finally ran out of roads." Her eyes stung. She hated that it hit so deep. She had run out of roads, spiritually, emotionally, everything. She'd been running from her own life for years, driving from one hall to the next like maybe the next paycheck, the next delivery, the next sunrise would make her feel like a person again. But she never felt anything but tired. And now, out of nowhere, he had appeared, asking for water of all things. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd been the one dying of thirst. Not her body, her soul. She stood there a long time, staring at the sky, the Milky Way stretching like a river of light across the heavens. Then, quietly, she said, "If that was you, I don't even know how to start again." The wind shifted. The truck's side mirror glinted, flashing moonlight like a blink of light back at her. "Start with one drop." The next morning, she woke up before dawn, still parked at the rest stop. Her neck was stiff, her eyes puffy. She wasn't sure if she'd dreamed that conversation or if it really happened. But something in her chest felt lighter, like the air had cleared after a storm. She checked her fuel, then rummaged through her cab for anything to drink. Nothing but an empty coffee cup and a stale granola bar. She sighed. When she stepped outside, she saw something that made her stop cold. Right there on the picnic table was a sealed bottle of water. She hadn't seen it last night. It wasn't there. She was sure of it. Her first instinct was to think someone else had left it, but there were no other trucks around. No tire tracks. No footprints but hers. Her hands shook as she picked it up. The label was worn off, but the seal was intact. She twisted the cap and took a sip, and it was cold. Ice cold. That's when she started crying. Not loud, not messy, just quiet, exhausted tears that came from somewhere deep inside. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, Jesus. You got my attention." For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't alone in that cab. Later that day, she stopped at a diner in Flagstaff to grab a coffee and call her son. It had been weeks since they spoke. He usually didn't pick up. But this time, after the second ring, he did. "Yeah," came his voice, groggy and annoyed. "Hey, kiddo. It's me. Pause. Oh, Mom. What's up?" She smiled faintly, tracing her finger along the edge of her coffee mug. "Just checking in. You doing okay?" "Same as always," he said. "You on the road?" "Yeah," she said softly. "Always." Silence stretched between them. Then, before she could stop herself, she said, "Listen, Dylan. I'm sorry." He hesitated. "For what?" "For being gone all the time. For everything. I thought I was doing what I had to. But I think I forgot what mattered most." Another pause. Then, quieter, he said, "You okay, Mom? You sound weird." She laughed, a small, watery sound. "Maybe I am. Maybe I finally saw something that made me remember who I was." "What's that supposed to mean?" She thought for a moment. "It means, I think I met Jesus last night." There was silence. Then he said, "You serious?" "Yeah," she whispered. "And he told me I've been thirsty for a long time." Dylan didn't say anything for a while. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. "You been drinking enough water, Mom?" That made her laugh for real this time. "Yeah, baby. I'm working on it." She hung up with a smile she didn't even know she had left in her. As she got back in her truck, she looked at the empty road ahead. The same road she'd driven 1,000 times. But for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. Somewhere in the air, she swore she could still hear that soft voice. "Start with one drop." And for the first time in years, she whispered back, "All right, Lord. I'm ready." The engine roared to life, and the truck rolled forward. But the road wasn't leading her away anymore. It was leading her home. By the time Mary Jo crossed into Arizona, the world looked different. Not the land was still dry, endless, and stubborn as always, but her eyes had changed. She felt like she could see things she'd driven past 100 times but never noticed. The way light touched the rocks at sunrise, the curve of dust devils dancing across the plains, the lonely beauty in all that emptiness. She didn't tell anyone else about what happened that night. Who would believe her? A barefoot stranger glowing in the desert, knowing her name, asking for water like some kind of holy hitchhiker? No. She kept it to herself. But the words he said, those stayed. They weren't just words, they were roots sinking into her chest, growing deeper every mile. Start with one drop. She thought about it constantly. What did it mean? At first, she figured it was about faith. Maybe she was supposed to pray again. So she did, awkwardly, quietly, like talking to an old friend she hadn't seen in years. She prayed while fueling up, while waiting at way stations, while watching the horizon bleed orange and pink at dawn. Sometimes it was just a whisper, "Thank you." Sometimes it was a plea, "Help me not screw up today." And slowly, things began to shift. She found herself calling Dylan more often, texting him, sending him dumb memes. At first, he barely replied. But one day he texted, "You sound different lately." She smiled when she read that. Maybe that's the point, she thought. But the real test came 3 weeks later. She'd been hauling medical supplies from Phoenix to El Paso, routine job, long haul, good pay. The weather forecast was clear, but halfway through the route, the sky turned mean. Black clouds rolled over the desert like smoke, swallowing the sun. The wind hit her rig sideways, rattling the trailer. Then came the rain, thick, angry, drumming on the windshield like God himself was knocking. She slowed to 40, gripping the wheel tight. The wipers fought the downpour, barely keeping up. Lightning ripped across the horizon, lighting up the sand and scrub. "Easy, girl," she muttered to the truck. "We'll get through this." Then she saw it. A small sedan, pulled halfway off the road, hazard lights blinking weakly. Through the blur of rain, she saw a figure, someone waving frantically. Her gut twisted. She was already behind schedule, the road was slick, and every trucker's rule said stopping in a storm was asking for trouble. But something inside her, something she hadn't felt in years, said, "Stop." She hit the brakes, tires hissing as the rig came to a careful stop. The rain poured harder, drenching her the moment she stepped out. She ran to the car, boots sinking into mud. "Hey!" she shouted over the wind. "You okay?" A woman inside rolled down her window just enough to be heard. She looked terrified. "My car died. My phone's dead too. I've been out here for an hour." "Anybody else with you?" "My little girl," the woman said, motioning to the back seat. A small face peeked out, a girl maybe 6 or 7, clutching a stuffed bunny. Mary Jo's chest tightened. "All right," she said. "Come on. I'll get you to the next rest stop." The woman hesitated. "You sure?" "Lady," Mary Jo said, smiling through the rain, "I've been rescued myself not too long ago. It's your turn." The woman blinked, then nodded and grabbed her child. They ran through the rain together, climbing up into the cab. Mary Jo handed them both towels and cranked the heat. "Thank you," the woman said, shivering. "I didn't know what to do." "Don't thank me," Mary Jo said softly, glancing at the storm outside. "Thank the one who told me to stop." They rode in silence for a while, the little girl watching raindrops crawl down the window. Then she asked, "Are you an angel?" Mary Jo laughed. "Sweetheart, if you saw my speeding tickets, you'd know I'm not." The mother smiled faintly. "Still, you saved us." Mary Jo's throat tightened. "No," she said. "He did." They reached a small diner off the highway an hour later. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed and glowing under the first light of dawn. She waited with them until a tow truck arrived. The mother hugged her tight before leaving. "You were sent," she whispered. Mary Jo didn't argue. She just nodded. "Maybe." After they drove off, she sat in her cab for a long while, staring at the reflection of her tired face in the rearview mirror. And then it hit her. Start with one drop. It wasn't about prayer. It wasn't even about belief. It was about mercy. About giving, even when she had nothing left to give. About offering water, literal or not, to the thirsty. That was what he meant. Her tears came fast, hot, unstoppable. Because she'd been the thirsty one. But now, she'd finally learned how to pour. Months passed, and everything changed. Mary Jo still drove trucks, but she wasn't the same driver anymore. She started volunteering with a ministry that helped stranded travelers. She carried spare water bottles, blankets, and food in her rig. Sometimes she'd pull over for people nobody else would stop for, the homeless, the lost, the forgotten. And every time, she thought back to that night in the desert, to the man who asked her for water and instead gave her life back. Dylan came to live with her that summer. He helped her wash the truck, fix old parts, even ride along on shorter hauls. They fought sometimes, because that's what moms and sons do, but there was laughter now. Real laughter. One evening, as they parked by a lake outside Amarillo, she told him the whole story. Everything. When she finished, he just stared at her. "You really think that was Jesus?" Mary Jo looked out across the water, watching the sunset catch on the ripples like fire. "I don't think, kiddo." "I know." He was quiet for a while, then said, "What did he look like?" She smiled. Like every man who ever needed a drink of water. Dylan frowned. That makes no sense. Maybe not, she said, chuckling. But one day it will. They sat there together, the truck rumbling softly, the world quiet. And as the last light faded, Mary Jo whispered a prayer, not out of habit, but out of gratitude. "Thank you," she said, "for stopping me when I wouldn't stop myself." The wind brushed her face, warm, gentle, familiar. And just for a heartbeat, she swore she heard that same voice again. "One drop at a time, Mary Jo." She smiled. Then she reached into the cooler beside her, pulled out 2 bottles of water, and handed one to her son. "Here," she said. "Never let yourself go thirsty." He laughed, cracking it open. "You mean literally, or?" She grinned. "Both." The truck lights flickered in the distance as evening swallowed the horizon. And somewhere out there, on another lonely road, maybe another lost soul was about to hear a soft voice asking for water. Because once you've met him, you never stop driving toward the light again.